Hello everyone, it's Matt here, and today we're going to be talking all about Homogenic by Björk. Now, Homogenic is a classic album for a number of reasons. I love the album personally, and a lot of people agree with me that it is Björk's best album, and she's released many brilliant albums over the years and everything. But Homogenic's probably the best, in my opinion, for a number of reasons. Firstly, it's stylistically consistent, as we're going to explore in a minute. Some of her earlier and later albums are sort of a little bit all over the place. But Homogenic really feels like an album that flows really nicely and works well together, and it's greater than the sum of its parts, effectively. The instrumentation is also another key factor in why Homogenic is so brilliant. This fantastic combination of orchestral instruments, strings and that sort of thing. I think it's a string octet that plays on the record. And fusing that really nicely with electronic sort of beats, percussion, and electronic bass lines and synth lines and things like that. And the way that Björk fuses them all together works really nicely and creates a very interesting, almost idiomatic soundscape. Really characterises Homogenic and her style, and I love that. The other thing that really makes the record stand out for me is Björk's fantastic voice. The fact that she's Icelandic obviously means that her approach to the English language is going to be a little bit different from most other English speakers, and her accent really characterises her singing, and I love it. I think her voice is fantastic. It always has been. It's really beautiful the way that she can capture her emotions just with using words and the way she sings them like no other. When you listen to Björk singing, you know it's her. Her vocal range is just phenomenal, and her lyrics are beautiful as well. So all of that, when you put it together, you know, you're making a homogenic smoothie. The key ingredients being crazy instrumentation, fitting together really nicely, and Björk's fantastic vocals. Whiz it all up together and drink that smoothie down, my friend, because you have one heck of an album on you. So let's start a little bit by talking about Björk and her background and everything like that. She was born in 1965 in Reykjavik, Iceland. Her mother was a political activist and her father was an electrician, and perhaps both of those roles can be heard in her music. I don't know. I definitely think that some of her work is political. Obviously, that's down to how you interpret. But some of her albums, like the one that really stands out for me is Volta, in the political way. So perhaps that could have had an effect. And she definitely makes a lot of electronic music, so there we go. Björk had a very musical upbringing. At the age of 11, she released her first solo album, which was effectively a collection of covers in Icelandic, with a couple of songs that she'd written herself. These were instrumental pieces, and they were very respectable for an 11-year-old, and I actually quite enjoyed them. It was interesting. I mean, it was never going to be a fully fledged, full-blown album, but it was still pretty interesting to hear what she was getting up to at that time. As a teenager, she began to explore lots of other different forms of music. She was in lots of rather interestingly named punk bands, ranging from the all-girl Snot and Spit to another band called Cork the Bitch's Arse. Obviously in Icelandic, so if you're an English speaker and you don't understand Icelandic, you won't get that joke at all. But fortunately, we have Wikipedia for those solutions. As well as post-punk and punk and all of that sort of thing that she was delving into, she was in a jazz fusion group, and this would reflect some of her later work as well. As she some of the songs, especially off Debut, her second album. It's funny because it's called Debut. Like the Anchor song and Aeroplane are very jazzy, and you can definitely hear that. And perhaps this was inspired by this jazz fusion upbringing. Eventually, she joined a band called the Sugar Cubes, who were apparently very famous in the 80s. I'm going to be honest, I'd never really heard of them before I'd listened to Björk, but apparently they were quite big, and they had a very large hit single, and it was called Birthday. I gave it a listen. It's a pretty cool song. The music video is quite weird, but kind of cool. And you can definitely see how Björk progressed from there to Debut, her second album. And that was released in 1993. After 5 years with the Sugar Cube, she decided that enough was enough. She wanted to be on her own, do a solo thing, as many artists do. And Debut is a brilliant album, and I love it. However, it is a little bit all over the place, as I was just saying. It's There's a very wide range of musical influences that Björk had obviously experimented with, ranging from sort of very classically influenced on songs like Human Behaviour and Venus as a Boy, where we have some lovely string arrangements going on there. I think Human Behaviour, the main riff is actually played on a timpani. I know timpani's a tuned percussion, but I don't know that specifically because I've never written for a timpani. But there we go, it definitely sounds like that, and you'll know what I mean if you heard that song. As well as that, we have some more dancey, poppy kind of affairs going on in songs like Crying and More to Life Than This. And of course, as I mentioned, the jazzier songs like Aeroplane and The Anchor Song. So that was a pretty cool album. In 1995, she released her second album, Post. I'm sorry, her third album, but you know what I mean. I'm not really counting her childhood album. So yeah, her second album, we'll call it that. And Post basically did what Debut did on steroids. I mean, Debut was sort of a bit sort of all over the place, had a very wide range of influences. Post, every song was completely different from one another. Seriously, it had 6 singles, and they all just, like, you wouldn't know it was for the same artist if it wasn't for Björk singing. It was weird. But Post is definitely a very intriguing listen, so, you know, if you're a fan and you haven't heard that one, I'd strongly recommend it. More so, as I say so often, a collection of singles as opposed to a proper album, I feel. It never flows as well as Homogenic or some of her later work like Volnicura or Biophilia or something like that. But Post is certainly an interesting listen. It also has one of my favourite ever Björk songs on it, and that's Hyper Ballad. I love that song. It's the very sort of dark sub bass that starts the song, and then it just builds up into this sort of almost club anthem type thing with these very sort of clubby kind of beats added to it before it just ends on this gorgeous string arrangement that really finishes the piece off, and it's a lovely piece of work. I love Hyper Ballad. Anyway, after Post, Björk was becoming quite famous. She had a very big crossover hit single called It's So So Quiet, which I'm sure you'll have heard. Everyone's heard that song. It was massive. Not my favourite song by Björk, admittedly. It's the sort of thing that you'd hear in a musical, but it's still a pretty cool song. And I think there are a couple of incidents that she was involved with to do with her fame, one of which involved the paparazzi. There was this woman reporter who was she'd been following her around for 4 days, and I think Björk just got fed up in the end and just beat the crap out of her. It's brilliant. Björk's not the kind of person who, having watched various interviews with her and listened to her work, you'd expect to do that, but no, enough was enough. And I can understand it, honestly. If someone was following me around for 4 days, I would have beaten them up before that. So there we go. She did well to last that long. But anyway, eventually she moved away from the city and all of that, went back to Iceland, her roots and everything, and that's where she came up with Homogenic, which is very inspired by her homeland. The volcanic beats and the various references to nature and things like that in songs like Yoga and Bachelorette and stuff like that. You can really hear the influence of Iceland in that piece of work. She recorded Homogenic in Spain, I do believe, actually, which is an interesting location considering a lot of it is about Iceland. But there we go. And it was produced alongside LFO's Mark Bell, who sadly died in 2014, I think. But there we go. And the two of them, because she wanted to collaborate with him from the start. Instead, she got Nelly Hooper, who produced Massive Attack. But eventually, she managed to persuade Mark Bell to work with her. And and the product of their collaboration was Homogenic, and it is just a beautiful album, as I was saying. So anyway, let's do a quick track-by-track review of it. Here it is in its CD case and everything. I haven't got it on vinyl. I think you can get it on, it's green vinyl, I think it is. It's coloured, I know that, and I've never really had any coloured vinyl before. Let's get it open. That's the inside and everything with all the lyrics and the CD. So we start off, the first song on Homogenic is Hunter, which is a very brooding, sort of quite dark song to start the album and gives it a very sort of tense, anticipatory feel to it. Starts with this very high-pitched synth and these sort of very frantic, bubbling sort of synthesized kick drum beats that really add this aura of anticipation to the piece. Björk's vocals come in about sort of 20 seconds into the piece. Very sort of effects-driven, EQ on it and everything, really sort of distorting the vocals, making them feel quite sort of alienating. And then eventually the strings come in, sort of really building up the piece, the texture thickens and everything, and you just get this sense that something is going to build up. And it builds up into this sort of B section, let's call it. It's kind of like a ternary form piece. It sort of goes ABA, where she sings, I thought I could organise freedom. How Scandinavian of me. What the sentiment is behind those lyrics, I'm not quite sure. But anyway, that's a pretty cool lyric. And it sort of quells into this nice little sort of uprising, and then dies back down, and ends with just the kick drum. And it's very sort of... It's a very good palate cleanser to start the album, I feel. After Hunter, we have Yoga, which is probably my favourite Björk track ever. It's just a beautiful, beautiful song. The lyrics are fantastic. It's all about wanting to embrace life and live it to the full. That's how I interpret it anyway. Living like at the state of emergency, as she says in the sort of the main refrain of the song and everything. The string arrangements on this track are gorgeous, and I think they were actually written by Björk, who is classically trained and everything as a musician. So I got a lot of respect for her for writing that. It's just beautiful. And the way it works, again, is when I was talking about how the strings were working with the beats in the introduction of this video, Yoga was really the song I was on about, because the beats are fantastic in the way that they work. It's kind of a juxtaposition, but the way it works is just so... it contrasts, but at the same time, it sort of melts together really nicely. It feels very organic and fresh and new, and really captures this feeling of being at one with nature that Homogenic so conveys so well. Beats literally feel like tectonic plates colliding, or volcanoes erupting, or whatever you want to interpret it as. And the music video does a very good job of showing this as well. It literally just shows the earth splitting in two, and you can see all the lava underneath it. It's really cool. After Yoga, we have Unravel, which Tom York out of Radiohead said was one of the most beautiful songs he's ever heard. And Radiohead did a pretty cool cover of it. But anyway, Unravel is, again, a very sweet song, very beautiful song. However, for me, it doesn't perhaps develop harmonically as much as I would have liked it to have done. It sort of is just based on this sort of 2-chord refrain, and it just is on that the whole way through the song. But it is a very pretty song. In some ways, for me, it serves as a little bit of a filler between Yoga and Bachelorette, but then it's very harsh to call Unravel a filler, because it really isn't. It's still a very beautiful, very mournful song, actually, with this church organ in the background as it ends. And really sets the mood very nicely for Bachelorette, the 4th track off this album and the 2nd single, I do believe. Bachelorette is grandiose, it's epic, it's just this very vast piece of music. The text is really thick in it and everything. And over the top of this, we just have Björk at her finest in terms of singing. It's absolutely... You just feel in awe listening to it. It's really quite... It almost sets you on edge a little bit, just by how the sheer sort of fullness to her voice and everything against this rich, very loud, very sort of... almost in-your-face string melodies and everything. And you've got this quite nice sort of piano thing going on in the background, just like a left-hand... piano bass part to it, and that really differentiates it from the other string ballads on this song. It's probably one of the more poppy songs on the album, but at the same time it's just very, you just can't help but feel in awe. The lyrics for Bachelorette and also Yoga, I think, were co-written by Björk with Icelandic poet Sion, and he worked with Björk a lot later on in her career as well, and you can really feel the poetic ideas that are behind these lyrics, and I love that. And it's just really it's like the cherry on the cake. I mean, the instrumentation is almost perfect on this album, but the fact that the lyrics are so beautiful as well really sets it apart from its peers and its counterparts. After Bachelorette, then we have a little bit of a sag. I think I'm going to be a little bit critical here through All Neon Like, Not Alarm Call, 5 Years, and Immature. And those 3 songs, I feel like, a bit like Unravel, just don't develop as much as I would have liked them to have done. All Neon Light has got this really quite harsh synth sound that comes in about halfway through that just annoys me. So I'm not a massive fan of that. It is a very pretty song again. All the songs on this album are pretty, apart from Pluto, but we'll get onto that in a minute. But All Neon Light, the bit where she sings, "Don't get angry with yourself, I'll heal you." That's a really powerful part of the song. In the same way, 5 Years, when Björk sings in that final refrain, "You can't handle love." It's obvious you can't handle love. It's really, really powerful. Björk really conveys this feeling of being bruised and emotionally sort of... it's very emotionally charged, the way she sings it. And again, on 5 Years, the strings are used to their full effect. The piece up until the final chorus, really, is very sort of electronic. It's got this very heavy beat to it, and it feels almost a bit sluggish, and I wasn't a massive fan of it until this final chorus. The strings come in, again, like a massive geyser sort of bursting up from the ground, and the final chorus just sets it apart. It's just beautiful, and it's just her voice and the strings, and that's what makes a good song. Instrumental contrast, I think. So 5 Years, definitely a standout track in that final part. Immature is probably the weakest song off the album. The original idea to it is very nice, but it just doesn't go anywhere, in my opinion. It just sort of... It seems its main purpose is just for Björk to sort of do her vocal acrobatics, shall we call it. But the instrumentation doesn't really develop at all. The harmonics don't develop. There's no real dynamic contrast or anything like that if you're looking at it from a technical point of view. But then we get Alarm Call, and Alarm Call is the poppiest song on the album, actually. I said Bachelorette's poppy, but Alarm Call is a lot more upbeat. It's got this really cool sort of electronic feel to it and everything. The demo of Alarm Call was actually called Jacko as a sort of a tribute to Michael Jackson before Björk had come up with a proper name to it. And it does sound like a Michael Jackson song, actually. It's a really cool song. You could have heard it on something like Post or Debut or anything like that as one of the poppier songs on those albums. Alarm Call is one of the most uplifting songs on the album as well. It's all about wanting to free the human race from suffering, as she sings. I want to be on a mountaintop with a radio and good batteries and free the human race from suffering. Beautiful lyrics. After Alarm Call, then we have the sort of the climax of the album, which is Pluto. Now, Pluto has divided the fan base for being completely weird, and it's just a very difficult track to listen to. I mean, I love it. It's not what you call beautiful or pretty in a conventional sense, but its purpose upon the album is just to really... I was talking about in Hunter, the way she sort of alienates the listener with the way she sings, and she does that again on Pluto. I think the effects are there again on her vocals and everything, very sort of harsh effects. Thanks. Pluto explodes, basically. She literally sings, "Excuse me, I just have to explode." And yeah, I can feel it. Again, the way that she conveys this feeling is just brilliant, and really, it gives you goosebumps. It puts your hairs on edge. It is difficult to listen to, actually, because in the middle part of it she just screams. It's just her screaming, sort of wailing away, and admittedly, in my opinion, it does go on a little bit, but it's just captivating to listen to. It's just this and this very driving primal synth line that goes along with it, and it's just, you can't help but just take a breath after that one. So it's a good job that the final track, All Is Full of Love, is like a breath of fresh air. Just like returning to the surface. It's a beautiful, beautiful way to end the album. All Is Full of Love is one of the most beautiful songs I've ever heard. It's lovely. Once again, it's the strings that really make this track stand out, and Björk's lovely voice that goes over the top of it. And you have a few like these little vocal samples that come in where she sings All Is Full of Love. And it just sort of builds and builds as the synth comes in and everything, and this very nice synthesized harp sound and everything. And then just the instrumental palette, the sort of sonority of these instruments that are coming in really enhances the mood of the piece. It's a lot more relaxed. It's very joyous and happy, and just a beautiful way to end the album. It just leaves you feeling absolutely complete after Pluto as well. So there we go. That's how Homogenic runs and everything. But anyway, that's just my views on the album. It's a classic. It's a lovely, beautiful, brilliant album, and I think a lot of people would agree with me saying that it's because of this instrumentation and just the way it all fits together like a big jigsaw. It's a great analogy for it, wasn't it? Anyway, are you into Björk? Have you listened to any of her albums? What do you think of her? Do you think that I'm talking absolute nonsense when I say that Homogenic's her best album? What do you think of Volnicura and the new Not Get video? That's pretty cool, isn't it? In a 360 virtual reality and everything. So you'll know what I mean if you've listened to her. Anyway, thanks very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, give it a like, subscribe, and you can see all my other videos about this sort of thing, if that's what you're into. And yeah, I will see you in the next video.